out to Mike. Mike and our go way back to the good old days when we used to all hang out at Naughty Nancy's and kind of do our little live, what do we call those things? Open mic nights. And have some fun and play some guitar. In fact, I was talking to the guy that's got the shop next to me, and it's a sixth sense. It's kind of like cars. You know how you look at somebody and you go, I wonder if that guy's in the cars. And you say, hey, because they have a look about them. It's the same thing with a musician. A musician has a look, or somebody that collects guitars, or somebody that collects anything. There's this. It's like a sixth sense. Those of us that are into it, it's kind of like, you go in that direction. And so I was at my little warehouse this afternoon, and the guy in the shop next to me, he was getting in his car, and I thought, I had this funny feeling, a sixth sense. I said, hey, I wonder if Brian's into guitars. So I walk over and I go, hey, Brian, you ever run across guys with vintage guitars? He goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. He says, I used to collect them. My mom had a pawn shop, and we used to get guitars all the time. And I go, no way. I said, he goes, yeah, what are you into? And I said, well, I'm kind of like, I like old Strats and SGs and Fender Mustangs and stuff. He goes, oh, I'm a real Gibson guy. I got a bunch of Strats. So he pulls out his phone and starts showing me all these really cool Gibson SGs. And Gibson SGs is kind of like the Batwing looking kind of thing that Tommy Iommi plays, and Robbie Krieger, Frank Zappa played it. And a number of guys like that. And that's what I think. Who else played that? Well, Krieger is probably the most well-known. And just a really, really cool guitar. Clapton paid him. Jimi Hendrix played an SG. Richie Blackmore played an SG at one time, once or twice, usually ES 335s, which is the big hollow bodies. But anyway, so it's really kind of funny how you just kind of run into people. And you get a sixth sense. Same thing with cars, every once in a while, it's kind of like if you wear a shirt and your shirt says car got a Chevrolet on it, or Ford, or Porsche, or BMW, or, Ferrari or something like that, Lamborghini. And of course, ours has a Lamborghini on the back, 350 GT. It's weird no, it's not weird. That's basically advertising. Okay. It's kind of like the guys that wear sports shirts, but that's the first clue. But the other thing, the sixth sense, even if you see some guy just walking around, kind of tooling around, you just never know, through a parking lot or something like that, But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, and I don't know where I was going with that, but
yeah, I'm not sure either, but that's okay.
Hey, you got any cool little sound effects?
Well, you were just saying that that's how you can spot a musician, spot a car enthusiast.
Yeah,
that's just basically the point there.
Yeah, and never judge a book by its cover, And
I'm sorry, I got to call you back.
Anyway, the good thing is I'm on flacarshows.com, and we got a whole slew of car shows. I see that Quaker Steak's back on their deal. What's that thing up in Orlando called? The Villages got their event this weekend.
There's a couple cars. There's a couple of Cars and Coffees there. There's a couple of Days Cafe, but then there's also there's Orlando Cars and Coffee of Central Florida, and a few others scattered around the area. So
yeah, Old Town's back on the schedule here, so that's good. So
but then keep telling Tara what's going on with your event, so she can advertise it correctly.
Yep, that's the best place to go. So go to flacarshows.com, and you can find out where all the car shows are in the state of Florida. And I'm sure that if you're from another state, whether you're from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Michigan, Chicago, or Illinois, California, someplace like that, I'm sure they got stuff going on there too as well. But anyway, so for our Florida guys, it's flacarshows.com. Bobby, let's go back in time here a little bit. Since cars are like time machines,
right.
So let's just kind of like diddy butt back. And I don't own any 80s cars, but
so we should play the cassette player tonight.
Yeah, let's go to the cassette player.
80s?
Well, speaking of car, yeah, we just sold our last 80 car. We had an 88 Porsche 951, which is basically a 944 turbo, and that's on its way to Charleston, South Carolina right now. So a big shout out to Kevin, who's probably tooling down 301. He's probably close to Atlanta by now. And but anyway, hey, so let's play a little Tears for Fears. Now, the reason I like this song is because the lead singer there drives a Austin Healey MK3 3000 BJ8 Series 2, and my first car was a 3000 Healey. So I have a thing for this song. Hey, you're tuned into Nostalgia Radio Cars. Don't shut that down. We'll be right back. Here's a little Tears for Fears. Let's go back to 1982.
Acting on your best behavior. Help me make the most of freedom and pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to live. There's no way.
Come enjoy the best brews in Tampa Bay at Dunedin Brewery. Known as Florida's oldest microbrewery, they are always working to create a unique variety of craft beers for every taste. In addition, Dunedin Brewery features a full menu, including everything from their famous wings, burgers, salads, flatbreads, and more. Don't forget about their live music, including the Wednesday Night Players Jam. That's Dunedin Brewery, 937 Douglas Avenue in downtown Dunedin. Visit them online at DunedinBrewery.com.
Looking for car shows? Then look no further than FLACarshows.com. On your computer or on your mobile device, FLACarshows.com is a comprehensive list of automotive events, plus videos and news articles. Whether you're looking for car shows, cruise-ins, meetups, automotive festivals, cars and coffees, or anything else relating to an internal combustion engine, then this is a site for you. Check it out online or on your phone at FLACarshows.com.
Okay, we're back and you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. And where was I going with this before? Oh, we were talking about songs, music, and guitars and cars, and our Porsche that's on its way to South Carolina, Charleston, as a matter of fact. But anyway, yeah, Porsches are cool cars. I have got to admit I'm kind of pretty much a Porsche guy. In fact, that's going to be the topic of this evening's show. We're going to have a gentleman on later. It'll be a surprise, as always. And unless they're an alumni guest, if they've been an alumni guest, then we'll go ahead and we'll reveal who it is. But if it's a new person, a new guest, then we usually save the best for last, as they say. And but I started out with 911s, and then I went to 928s, and then I went to, and somewhere along there I got into 356s. So I always was messing around with 356s. I actually wanted the 356 before. Now, my first car was really going to be a Shelby. Actually, I liked Lincolns. I liked all kinds of cars. But you know how it is. When you're a kid and you're 16 years old, you're kind of fickle. And so you're kind of influenced by what your neighbors had. Same thing with music. When I was a kid, my dad kind of coerced me. No, I'm not going to say that. He basically made sure I played the piano. That's why I started out playing. But then, 60s, growing up in Northern Cal, kind of a little rebellious. And everybody was into guitars and music and rock and roll and the Beatles and all that kind of stuff, and Rolling Stones and the Doors and everything. So we kind of influenced by rock and roll. So anyway, a lot of garage bands. Everybody had a garage band, drum sets and guitars. And so, we're the younger kids, the older brothers and sisters. So naturally, we kind of go in the garage when nobody was around and start beating around on their instruments. And that's how you kind of get hooked on it, which is kind of cool. So it's the same thing with the cars. And the cars in the area, and we were up in Northern California, so Laguna or Sonoma, Sears Point Raceway, which is Sears Point, which is
Mazda.
No, I can't. Sears Point, which can't even think of the name right now. Sears Point is God, I can't believe
Mazda.
It used to be Infineon, but it's Sears Point, which is gosh, I can't believe I can't even think of the name of it.
Oh, hang on.
Somebody will test me. But anyway, so since we were near the road race course there was a lot of sports cars, so that's why I was kind of influenced by sports cars relatively early on. But there was a lot of muscle cars. I mean, hot rods, street rods, stuff like that. That was just huge.
Sonoma Raceway.
Boy, I should have thought about that because my collie was named Sonoma, and Sonoma was the next county up from Marin County. So
it's not very nostalgic radio and cars.
I know. Hey, it's real, it's live, and it's radio. So.
And we have computers, so we can look this stuff up 200 megabits per second.
Okay, so Sonoma Raceway, but in the old days, it was called Sears Point. And then it became Sonoma, and then it went to Sears Point. Well, I don't know.
Infineon and then Sonoma.
Yeah, we still call it. It's just kind of like Laguna Seca. It's still Laguna Seca, even though they have all kinds of names for it. At any rate, so that's how I got influenced by that. But anyway, so as I got a little older, a lot of kids in school, they had MGBs or you had Mustang, Camaros, Firebirds, and occasionally you had a kid that had a Jag, and and keep in mind, these were older cars back in the 70s, so you can buy them relatively cheap, a couple grand, or less. And even Cobras, believe it or not, you can buy those for $500, $600, $700. They were sitting around. They didn't work, but they were out there. Anyway, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to go enough talking about cars. Let's get into some real meat here in a minute when I get my guests on the show. But that's how it works. You kind of you gravitate to what you were influenced by when you were a kid, because when you're a kid, you're impressionable. So, and those impressions stay with you for a lifetime. and they become passions, and you aspire to achieve those passions, right, Bobby?
Mm-hmm.
And
so let's go to Ice House.
Let's go to Little Ice House. We're back to the 70s. No, 80s. We're in the 80s somewhere.
87, it says.
1987. Okay. Wow, we just jumped up a few years. Okay, so this is Little Ice House by what's this called? This is
Electric Blue. Yep.
All right.
So
hey,
here's the cassette.
Here's a cassette. Okay, you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. We'll touch that dial. We'll be right back with our special guest.
Stuff's got to be on the freighter by dawn.
No problem.
Orders complete.
Yeah, well, we're going to be a couple stingers short.
That's the most important item.
Not to mention the most expensive. Come on, what's going on? The whole order's been prepaid.
Hey, talk to Kleiser. He's marketing. I'm distribution.
Yeah, but you see, the boat sails tomorrow.
Well, I'll make it up to you any way you want. Grenades, mortars. How about some biologicals?
What's that?
Chemical warfare shells. I'll tell you what, you lob a couple of those babies into Joburg, and that'll get their attention.
Stingers, pal. Stingers. That's what we ordered. That's what we paid for. That's what we want.
These are dated 1980.
So?
So? What, do we look like we just fell off a cabbage truck or what? They've been on the shelf 6 years.
So what? The Missouri was 45 years old. Lebanese didn't know the difference.
How do I know these are going to go bang?
You worried about that?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable concern.
So,
that psycho of yours blew up $150,000 worth of my automobile.
Hey there, this is John Oates, and you're listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Okay, we're back, and it's time to introduce. I have to laugh because I remember seeing it. That was a clip from Miami Vice, but it was a good one when they blew up Crockett's pseudo Ferrari Daytona. But anyway, it's time to introduce our special guest for the evening, who's a big fan of Miami Vice, I might add. He is the manager for Porsche Classic Market Development. He's also the curator of the Heritage Gallery inside the Porsche Experience at Atlanta, which is the old Coca-Cola factory, believe it or not, I think, or Ford factory. No, Ford factory, I think, yeah, at Porsche Cars of North America. I'm delighted to welcome to the show this evening, Ray Schaefer. Ray, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Robert, I'm doing great. How are you tonight?
Pretty good. So I know you're a big Miami Vice fan, so we did a little Miami Vice intro here for you.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Grew up watching that show in the 80s. Of course, my favorite episode had to be the one that featured the Miami Grand Prix with all those gorgeous IMSA GTP cars with the 962 Porsches in particular. You remember that episode?
You know, I do, and I should have thought about that one because that would have been probably a good clip to play. And that was an interesting show. So
that is there's a great story behind that one.
Yeah, wasn't that something to do? It had something to do with the driver, right? Something on that episode, and I can't remember. Was it driver?
It did.
And
yeah, it did. And if you ever have our friend Kevin Jeanette on the show, he can tell you all about the story because it involved a certain Florida 906, a Carrera 6, a very rare car, but let him tell you that story.
Okay, yeah, Kevin Jeanette is involved with Gunner Racing. He's very well known for his racing background. I think he used to do some stuff out in California. He's basically a wrench, you will, or a car, team owner, manager, does all kinds of stuff with Porsches. But right now, I think his big claim to fame is he's involved with the restoration of very rare Porsches, 906s, 904s, 917s, 908s, and things like that. To which you are in charge of the Heritage Gallery inside the Porsche Experience Center there. So tell us a little bit about what's going on up there at Porsche Cars of North America and their Porsche Classics.
Yeah, Porsche Classic. Yeah, I mean, that is since I left Brumos and went up to it's coming up on 5 years ago. Went to Porsche in Atlanta, the headquarters, which is, as you pointed out, inside the Experience Center Atlanta. That's at 1 Porsche Drive. I work inside the division known as Porsche Classic, which keeps our brand heritage on the road. We're basically serving all the owners' cars within the Classic lineup, which today is everything from the 356 models all the way up through the Carrera GT. And in short, Porsche Classic, we basically focus on 3 areas. We start all with the genuine Classic Porsche parts, which is expert service at our dealerships and 11 U.S. Porsche Classic partners. And finally, the Porsche Classic Factory Restoration, which we have the only facility for that outside of Stuttgart, right there in the workshop in Atlanta. So that's sort of the headquarters for Porsche Classic here in the U.S., if you will. The Heritage Gallery is an extension of that and is also part of the visitor experience when you come up to the Experience Center. And inside there, that's where we celebrate the history and heritage of Porsche. So you can see revolving exhibits. We like to keep them about 6 months, and then we'll change out the display with another theme so that visitors that come back have a chance to learn more and to keep seeing different variety and learning about not only the cars, whether they be street or racing models, but sometimes the engineers behind them, the designers, the people that made them famous, or just the people that enjoy driving them, people like you and me.
The exhibit's on now, and so what is the theme? Because I think you have a car that's from this area. It's a local car. It is now anyway. The yellow 996 Killer B, which is owned by a friend of ours, and that car you sold originally to Hurley Haywood, and when you were at Brumos, right?
Yeah, that actually is a great story, because when you're putting together these exhibits inside a space like the Heritage Gallery at the PEC Atlanta, you have to you can't always just fly something over from the Porsche Museum in Germany. We do that on occasion, but typically there's so many Porsches here in the United States that I work with significant collectors and private individuals who are willing to share their Porsche with us so that we can tell a story. And right now we're celebrating 20 years of the Porsche track experience. And to do that, there's a certain storyline that you have in mind. We go all the way back to the mid-1950s when Huschke von Hanstein and actually Max Hoffman, the importer for Porsche cars at the time, had the idea to give Porsche drivers a taste of what racing Porsche was like. And so he arranged with von Hanstein to have a 550 Spyder up in Connecticut brought to one of the racetracks. And so that was the first sort of driving experience we had where Porsche owners could get a chance to see what a race car was all about. And then we fast forward and we jump over a lot of time, but that story is told on the timeline wall that's there in the Experience Center. But then on the platform, we actually introduced the idea of 20 years ago, which just happened to be the start of the Porsche track experience. At the time, it was called the Porsche Driving Experience, I believe, and it took place at Road Atlanta. But in the brochure, there was a speed yellow 996 coupe. You know, the 996 was brand new at the time. It was the first ever water-cooled 911 generation. And on the cover of the brochure was a speed yellow 996 coupe. And we wanted to illustrate that. Of course, the car has some graphics on it, what have you, from the school. Well, we wanted to illustrate that part of the story with an actual car. And so it popped into my mind, as you pointed out, that 20 years ago, I just so happened to be at Brumos and I was selling Porsches. And I had a chance to take that car, which was Hurley Haywood's own personal driver at the time. He had ordered that car. It was a speed yellow Tiptronic with the sport design wheels, just a great specification for the car. And the owner of that car, who I sold it to at the time, our mutual friend, she still has the car and is so kind to share that car with us that she drove it all the way up to Atlanta so we could put it on display. Of course, we put the graphics on it so that we could give it that look just like in the brochure, so that people who remember that 20 years ago, who had went to the school, can come to this exhibit and see this 996 there today, and maybe have some great memories looking back what they did 20 years ago. Because as you know, we have a lot of people that come back and continue their education in driving expertise. And so for them, that may have been the start of it. And because of her help, we were able to beautifully illustrate that with that rather historic now 996 coupe that you and I both know so well.
Tell us about some of the other cars in this particular exhibit. So how many cars does it vary from exhibit to exhibit? How many cars you're going to have on display?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll change from display to display. And so in this case, we've got 20 years of the Porsche track experience. So that means we actually include a Cayenne, because it's the first time we ever did off-road driver training at the Barber Motorsports Park back in 2003 and 2004. So we needed to show that with a Cayenne, and we've got that there as well, first generation Cayenne. Then in 2011, 2012, we added the Porsche Cup School, where Porsche drivers actually had a chance to get behind the wheel of a real racing 911 GT3 Cup. And so we wanted to illustrate that in the form of a real car. And then finally, today, with the brand new 992, the latest generation of 911, we were able to exhibit that as well. So you can see the whole sweep of from the 1950s all the way up till today. This engineering drivers is what we call the exhibit, because that's really what it's all about. And so folks can come in, see memorabilia. We've got a film that was made that's playing in our theater there. So there's really a lot you can learn about it. And then in the same space, on the other side of the hall, we have a GT 1, 2, 3, and 4 theme. So we have this beautiful GT car theme that run with the G99, which was a car that was a tribute to a GT1 that was built right there in Florida by Kevin Jeanette, who we talked about a little bit earlier. We have that car there. It was raced by Paul Newman back in the day. He was one of the drivers, Chad McQueen and Milton Inter, another Porsche great. And then, of course, the GT2, the GT3, and the GT4, which is the Cayman series cars. There is a whole exhibit of these wonderful GT cars there. And that's just the upstairs. When you go downstairs into where we have our motorsport theme area, then down there you'll see one of the Porsche Indy cars, the 1989 chassis, which is very similar to the one that won the Mid-Ohio IndyCar race back in 1989. We have right now the Lowenbrow Special, the Porsche 962, that just happened to appear in that Miami Vice episode that we were talking about. That's on display right now. And we also have on loan from Bobby Rahall's collection out of Chicago, we have a Carrera 6, which is the 906 that is very similar to the car that appeared in that Miami Vice episode. This particular car actually ran the Targa Florio in Italy back in 1966, and it's just a beautiful example.
Speaking of which, you and Bobby Rahal are pretty good friends as well, and I know you have a podcast. Why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about your podcast and some of the guests that have been on your podcast, and how people can find out more about what you've got going on there?
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, this is something that started out not there wasn't really a whole lot of intention behind it in the very beginning, but a few months ago, as the COVID-19 started to take hold and everybody was at stay-at-home orders and what have you, I was having a conversation with Cam Ingram. He's the owner of Road Scholars up in Durham, North Carolina, and we were lamenting the fact that we were going to miss talking to so many of the people that we love to see at all the shows that we go to every year. You know, we just came back from Amelia Island. We were fortunate that we were able to get that event in before everything sort of broke loose. But then, as you know, events like Pebble Beach and Luftgekühlt, which is a Porsche-only show that had been delayed from May. Now it's hoping to happen in November. Excuse me. So we were really talking about, boy, we're going to miss not only all these wonderful shows that we go get to speak to folks, but also the cars and coffee in the local scene, just getting out on the weekend. And so we just decided that on Saturday morning, we would do an Instagram live at 11 o'clock in the morning. That way, for our friends out on the West Coast, they'd have a chance to be up and have a cup of coffee with us as we got caught up on what was going on that week between his shop in North Carolina and our shop in the Porsche Classic in the Experience Center. And so that kind of kicked off. We just decided to pick a topic one day, talking about different Le Mans races. 1998 was the one that I talked about because that was kind of the year that I started officially with Porsche. And so just so happens that one of the people that was listening in was Stefan Ortelli, one of the drivers who actually won the race for Porsche in 1998 in that beautiful GT1 race car. And so he wanted to come on and talk about it. And we were going to do a three-way discussion about that. But then we quickly discovered you can't have three people on an Instagram live stream. So out of that whole idea, we just decided that we would do our own video podcast so we could have these conversations that allow us to go into great detail about maybe one specific topic, maybe two. But our work daily, mine at Porsche Classic and Cam's at Road Scholars, require us to do a daily deep dive into Porsche history, go down the rabbit hole, basically, if you will. And so we just decided that we would talk to different people and we would specifically talk about one subject or maybe two subjects. So in the case of Bobby Rahal, you mentioned, a lot of people know him as the IndyCar champion that he is, the Indy 500 winner, I believe 3-time IndyCar champion. And maybe some folks don't realize, he's a Porsche family man, basically. His father raced a Carrera 6 back in the 60s and was quite the amateur racer. Won his class at Sebring in 1970 as an amateur. And Bobby was the second of what is now 3 generations of racing Rahals. And so we wanted to have him on and really just talk about his dad, talk about how he got involved with Porsche. And then, of course, Bobby won Daytona in 1981 in a 935, and he won the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1987 in a 962. And, of course, he had quite an IMSA career driving the 962 and other sports cars. And so we really just wanted to focus on that part of the Porsche history. So what we've been doing about every other week is we've been posting up a video podcast that's about an hour long, and it's a deep tracks, fresh brewed and air-cooled deep tracks history that we go down. Today, we actually just spoke with Tony Hatter from Porsche Design. He's responsible for the classic 993 generation 911. He's also responsible for that GT1 race car we talked about, and also the Carrera GT production car, another Porsche classic vehicle. And so we'll be having that up on YouTube and on the Road Scholars website on Saturday morning. So if folks are interested in watching that, just go on to Road Scholars website or onto their YouTube channel, and you can see that. I often have the link in my bio on Instagram as well for people that like to tune in and watch that way. Ray.Schaefer is where I post that.
Okay, super. Take us back to when you were, let's just say, a neophyte. When did you first kind of get caught by the car bug, and what was it like for you, and kind of how did it evolve? It's always an interesting story. It's very similar. A lot of people have a similar story, but let's hear yours.
Well, thank you. It is. And folks, my folks tell me that my first word was car.
Okay.
So I said that before mom or dad. So there's probably other car people out there who have the similar story. So I said car and little toy cars and playing around, what have you. But getting older, if you will, to the part where it probably gets more interesting. I can remember my dad was always fixing up cars for him to drive over the winter, and then he would drive that through the summer and then sell it in the fall and fix up another car. And I'm talking about cars like Volkswagen Beetles, Volkswagen Rabbits, things like that. Nothing exotic. And so we did a lot of Beetles. And I remember when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, riding my bike in our neighborhood, and I went down the street, and our neighbor had a garage door open, and inside, sideways, I could see the profile of what looked like a Beetle, but there was something different about it. I wasn't sure what it was, but it just didn't. It looked cooler than the Beetles that I was used to. And so I went in for a closer look and found out that I was looking at a 356. And the owner of the car, our neighbor, sort of walked me through the whole thing there. And so from that point forward, I had really gotten interested in cars. And then one day, my uncle shows up at our house with his station wagon and had just come from a house sale. And he said, in the back of the station wagon is a bunch of car magazines. If you want to get them out of the car and take them into your room, you can have them. And so I did. I took them inside. And it turns out that he had found a complete set. This was in the mid-1980s. So he had a complete set of Road and Track magazines that somebody had sold him. And so he gave them to me. I took them into my room and I organized them in chronological order. And that became my childhood. Instead of going outside and playing football or baseball with the other kids, I was paging through every one of those Road and Track magazines. And I was learning about people like Peter Gregg and Hurley Haywood and all the great classic cars of the day and of the brass era and all the racing that was going on in Europe, Formula One. And that was where it really started for me. And so from there, I just kept on going, and I've kept that collection. I actually still have it today, and I've had my subscription, so it's complete. It goes all the way up to this month.
Well, now that's interesting. And I'm going to probably say, so then where you're at right now in your career is probably like almost a dream come true. I mean, you're working, being a Porsche fanatic, and then being involved with, Porsche management and from a Porsche Classic standpoint, and then curator of a basically a magazine, a museum, and then being able to put on these presentations. That's the epitome. I mean, and you were at Brumos, which is really kind of like the premier Porsche dealership, probably not only in the Southeast, probably around the country. Okay, at least, but definitely for sure on the East Coast. And then with this racing legacy, its connection with Porsche, I mean, you've had a stellar career, and you've just gone on this linear progression to like a job that people would die for. I mean, amazing.
Yeah. I don't like to talk about it too much because I don't want other people throwing their name in the hat for it. But but you're absolutely right. It is a blessing, and I love every minute of it. To help build the brand of what Porsche Classic is and is becoming, and Classic owners will see more and more of that in the years to come in the form of support for their Classic cars so they can keep them on the road and driving. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always been involved and interested in business as well as the racing end of it and the history end of it. So when you bring that all together, of course, one of my mentors and great friend was the late Bob Aiken. Oh. And he's the one that introduced me to Bob Snodgrass, which is how I came to work at Brumos Porsche. I mean, I knew what Brumos Porsche was all about long before I worked there. And to go to work there and work alongside people like Bob Snodgrass and Hurley Haywood, it was just an incredible experience. And, as an inspiring racer at the time, and of course I'm talking 20 years ago, it was the perfect place to be. And so, I was able to be involved in a lot of what was going on there from both the business side of it and the racing side. I worked my way up from a salesman, the sales manager, and eventually general manager before leaving and coming to Porsche. And so really had a chance to grow in that position. The company was very much about growing talent from within. So I was very fortunate to the ownership, both Bob Snodgrass and Dan Davis. And yes, I mean, just wonderful mentors and people. And it does just kind of show you that in the community that we're in, the automotive community, it's definitely a hobby, but it's also a heck of an industry. And there's an obligation there to share it, I feel, and to help out others, much like I was helped out. And sometimes it's just by sharing the passion of it, because then people realize that they can take what they love so much about cars and be involved in it. I mean, it's really a lot like what you're doing with your radio show, going on, 9 years now, which you've been doing
10
your
years.
show?
Yeah, 10 years. So
congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, we just had our anniversary show here about a month or so ago, and Bill Warner was our guest. And, Bill, Bill very well, obviously Amelia Island, and super guy, just knows everybody, and just a huge Porsche guy himself. Let me ask you this. So because of the let's just say the interest in Porsche, particularly classic Porsches, the demand for the restoration side of it, the parts that we need to put these old cars, because I'm a diehard 356 guy. Was that kind of like because Porsche Classics hasn't been around, but like you said, maybe 5 or 6 years now, or maybe just a hair longer. But do you think that Porsche Classic, because we had Ferrari Classic and some of the other some of the factories would kind of restore cars on the side. If you had a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, or an Aston Martin or something like that, but Porsche Classic, kind of the demand, I don't want to say forced, but basically kind of inspired Porsche to say, all right, you know what, maybe we look at these classic cars a little bit more seriously because the enthusiasm is substantial. Porsche Classic has a lot of potential. Let's make that happen. Is that kind of how the story went?
Well, you know, the restoration of the cars had been going on for some time, and I don't have an exact, I want to say somewhere around the 2007 as far as the current form that you know it today. But even that is changing. And yeah, I mean, Porsche does it a little bit differently because we have dealer partners, and our dealer partners is a great network of very enthusiastic Porsche people. But the classic business is very special in its nature. As you know, it's very different from working on a car that's 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. It poses different challenges than what a newer late model car may. And so a dealer that's involved in that really has to want to be involved and have the passion around it and the desire, because it can be very time consuming. And so we look to help that situation out. Obviously, you mentioned the parts supply, genuine parts that fit the cars properly, that work right the first time. That's where everything starts for us. And not only are those parts available through classic partners and factory authorized dealerships, but those parts also come through a lot of the independent local shops that are out throughout the United States, actually all over the world. And we even have the Porsche Classic Parts catalog on a system called PartsLink24.com. Maybe you've heard of it, but shops can actually access this, and the fulfillment and everything comes through the dealer, but it goes right to the shop so that they're able to get the parts that they need to do the work to help keep the cars on the road. And so it's really about making sure that the parts are out there for the owners of the cars, because we want to keep the history driving on the road. You know, we don't need all these cars parked in a museum all the time. They're built to be driven, and that's really where they belong. So, you know, you take something like the 356 that you mentioned that you love, and from 1948 to 1965, there's over 77,000 of those were produced. And when it comes to available unique part numbers, we currently offer over 2,100 unique parts just for that model car. And the car range, as I mentioned earlier, goes from 356 all the way up to Carrera GT. So right now it's well over 52,000 parts that are in the catalog. And every year, our team in Stuttgart doing product research and development, reissues, and we're adding back in 200 to 300 new parts every year. So it just keeps on growing. And yeah, it's very important that we do that in order to help keep the cars on the road where they belong.
Where do you see the market with classic, not only Porsches, but cars in general? I mean, you know, we got a younger generation. We're trying to get involved in these cars. You met my son at Amelia Island. Bobby's in the, I have a 356. Yep. We have a 356 project car we're doing together besides my own. And but my son's influenced by me, you know, because he grew up in that environment, and we're trying to get more and more people. So how does that affect the future of how Porsche perceives where Porsche Classic is going to be today and let's say 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's definitely a family deal. There's no question about it. I mean, it's that again, it's the passion. I mean, you can't help not share it with your family. If your son or daughter takes a shine to it, then by all means, you know, you're doing everything you can to do that together. And so we see that a lot. I go to a lot of events where I see father-son, father-daughter, mother-son, mother-daughter, all kind of connections like that. And of course, it's generational. We were talking about the Ray Halls, obviously, between his dad in the 60s and him in the 70s, and his son Graham today,
Mm-hmm.
IndyCar star today, is very much into Porsche. So, it's a generational deal for sure. I don't think it's fading in any way. I mean, the passion for the cars are there. I see a lot of young people interested in the 356s. They're easy cars to learn and work on. And then there's some folks out there too that because of electronics and software are very talented electronically. And so the newer cars don't really faze them when it comes to tackling something like a later 911 or a 928. So there's all different levels of interest out there. And we, on the Porsche Classic side, we really just want to support that, make sure that the parts and the tools and the information is out there. Our website, the current version of it, is changing almost daily. But we keep adding more and more to it. Porsche Classic, PorscheUSA.com/classic. If you look that up, it's PorscheUSA.com/classic. If you take a look in there, you'll see all the different information about parts explorers and things of that nature. But we even uploaded the color books that were in the dealerships back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So if you want to reference the colors, you can go in there and find that historical documents and data that's in there. So there's a lot to share and there's a lot to learn. But again, to the podcast point, that's why we call it Deep Tracks. Depends on what track you want to get on. If it's the 356 or the 911 or 928, there's a lot that you can go down and learn. And we try to provide as much as we can. Of course, you can't do it all at once. So we're constantly building it and adding it and making it better and better.
We got a minute or two left. Why don't you tell people, our listeners, if they want to experience the Porsche experience in Atlanta, and there's also one on the West Coast, by the way, how do they go about doing it? And real quick and short, how long does it take to go through the whole program?
Well, there are many different programs you can experience when you're at one of the PECs. And you're right, we have the PEC here in Atlanta. We have the one in LA, which is in Carson, not far from the airport in LAX. But if you go to PorscheDriving.com, then you'll find not only the PECs on there, but also the track experience, which is in Birmingham, Alabama. And on the website, you can see all the different experiences that are on there, from everything from the track driving experiences to fine dining. Here in Atlanta, we have restaurant 356 and Carrera Cafe, and we have a sim lab. Right now, there's obviously limited openings because of the new rules and regulations that we have to adapt and work under. But you can go on there. There's tours. You can see everything that there is to do, and you can schedule it all online. That's actually how you have the appointment to come into the building. But the main thing is get behind the wheel of one of the new Porsches. You can drive everything from the Boxster 718s all the way up to the new Taycan electric car and experience it yourself, because there's no better way to experience a Porsche than behind the wheel yourself.
Real quick, we got about 20 seconds left. How much does it cost if I want to go up there and I want to do this by myself or with, individually?
Yeah, I'd have to look at it. I want to say that it starts between $350 and $400 for the 90-minute drive experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on the model car that you drive. But when you're driving the car, you're behind the wheel the entire time. There's no extended classroom session. Your instructor is right behind you. We used to do them side by side inside the car, but for social distancing now, we actually have a lead follow.
Wow.
And they're talking to you the entire time. Every person driving a car has their own private instructor.
Super, super. And again, one more time for our listeners, it's Porsche Cars of North America, and the driving experience is in Atlanta, Florida, and they can find all that information online, correct?
Yeah, PorscheDriving.com. And then for the classic information, that is PorscheUSA.com/classic.
Sounds good. Well, Ray, I want to thank you very much. Big shout out to our friends over there at Barber Motorsports, because that's where some of the driving goes on for the Porsche guys. And but I want to thank you very much for coming on the show this evening. Wish you luck in your podcast. Wish you luck with Porsche Classic, and I hope to get up there when all this thing blows over. I'd like to get up there and experience the Porsche experience myself in Atlanta.
I look forward to giving the backstage pass when you're up there. So you just let me know, Robert, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Very good. I want to thank my very special guest this evening, Ray Schaefer with Porsche Classic in Atlanta and the Heritage Gallery at the Porsche Experience, Porsche Cars of North America in Atlanta. And Ray, you take care. And all my listeners, don't forget to check us out here every Tuesday night on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Don't forget to tell your friends to tune in as well, because if you want to find out where some of the most fascinating and legendary names in motorsports are, and of course music too from time to time, check us out right here. And if you want to find out more about what's going on with Gulfstream Motorsports, go to our website, gulfstreammotorsports.com. Don't forget, you can see hear all the past shows at nostalgicradioandcars.com. Yes, go to FloridaCarShows.com. You can find out what's going on in Florida. Hopefully, I'll see you guys at some of the car shows. See you on the road, somewhere between here and Citrus County, Lake County, out in the country there, maybe tooling around Mount Dora. I want to see everybody burn some rubber. In the meantime, everybody stay safe, drive carefully, and love your family.
Deep and wide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through, break on through, break on through, break on through.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
WZHR, Zephyrhills.
FM 104.3.
Listen.
Trump sues police reform. I'm Ann Cates. The Trump administration is suing to block publication of a book by former National Security Advisor John Bolton.
He and Mr. Trump did not part on the best